On today's show, we continue our Houston Rockets NBA Draft Profile Series, taking a look at the two-way wing with upside, Carter Bryant out of the University of Arizona. We'll take a look at his strengths, his weaknesses, NBA player comps, projected fit with the Houston Rockets, and more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Just head on over to FanDuel.com. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here as we continue our NBA draft profile series for your Houston Rockets. Today we're going to be focusing on the wing out of University of Arizona, Carter Bryant. A lot to like about this kid, and we're going to hear from Madison's his little elevator pitch on him here in just a moment. But just so you know kind of what you can envision with this guy, his measurables really quickly. He's about 6'6.5", no shoes on, 215 pounds, almost a 7-foot wingspan, and an 8-foot 10-inch standing reach. Madison, what's your read on him? What's your elevator pitch for somebody who's never seen Carter Bryant play?
Yeah, so Carter Bryant is the prototypical 3-and-D wing that is very coveted around the league. These types of wings, of course, can play defense and shoot the three, but also Carter Bryant is a very elite and top tier athlete who is very effective as a cutter as well, but mainly he plays off ball and can shoot the ball very well, and is an incredible defender, can really get under your skin, can pressure the ball full court and switches incredibly, and can also, with his athleticism, be a weak side shot blocker. So all of those things are really intriguing for teams, but also as a freshman coming into Arizona's program, he really shocked guys, got onto the floor, and since he played lower minutes, it kind of left more to be desired, and see if he has some upside. So this is a guy who didn't show much in college as far as creation, but we think it's due to limited time. So there's some sneaky upside that really pushes him into the lottery and makes you really wonder, hey, does this guy has even more to show as than a 3-and-D wing?
Yeah, so it's just his stats from his 1 year at Arizona, only 6.5 points per game, 4.1 rebounds. Now, he did shoot 37% from three. However, he did it only 2.8 attempts per game, just averaged barely under 20 minutes per contest. So again, not a ton there by way of sheer volume, right? But there's enough there to kind of under the surface where you think, okay, in a bigger role, what could this kid be capable of? So looking at him as just kind of a prototypical 3-and-D wing, let's focus on maybe some of the defensive stuff here first, because I think that's maybe more so what you can look at and project. Okay, what's really exciting about him? What stands out the most about his, what he brings to the table defensively?
Well, I think when you combine his physicals, this is a big guy, physical defender, can really get his chest up on guys and really drive you out of the lane. He also does a very good job of pressuring up the court when he's engaged. And again, his help side defense with his athleticism, he really can impose himself on guys. So his role as a 3-and-D wing is very projectable. It gives him a very high floor as a prospect. And then when you combine that with the ability to shoot, and like you said, he didn't play much. He only, averaged about 19 minutes. Some people didn't even think he would really kind of even play this year because Arizona has a very veteran team, but he fought. He carved out a role on this team, and his defense kind of really kept him on the floor, and he was super effective. The team was even better when in the minutes that he played. It was actually kind of a shock that he didn't play more after he really started to come on and affect the game so positively. And so that's why a lot of people thinking, hey, there may be more to desire there, especially with the physical tools. If this guy's going to be able to maybe come in day one and be a very good impact defender, and could be, challenging for defensive all teams if everything works out.
Man, and to add, a little bit more to his stat profile again. So limited playing time at Arizona, but he did still manage to average 1 block per game and 0.9 steals per contest. So 1.9 in the stocks department. And then if you extrapolate that and look at his per 36 numbers, that's 1.9 blocks per 36 minutes and then 1.8 steals. So almost 4 stocks per 36 minutes. That's some like elite company. It's a little Tari Eason-esque, right? I'm not making any spoilers here, but that might be one of your comps later on. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he really reminds me athletically, almost similarly to Amon. The way Amon, can play weak side, backside, and block shots in those ways is he really can block. He has some incredible highlights where he blocks centers, where he really just make plays that he comes out of nowhere. Tari is more disruptive on the ground floor, really in the passing lanes. And he can be disruptive in those ways as well. But really where he shocks you and really impresses you is as a backline helper guy who can still be an elite one-on-one defender. And so he still has the discipline and the physicality to be an elite one-on-one defender. So his defensive style is more similar to Amon. Not going to be as good because he's not as quick twitch fast, but he is an elite athlete, better athlete than Tari Eason, and he has physicals more similar to Amon as well.
So obviously there's the shooting numbers there, right? And that's encouraging, 37% from downtown, albeit on low volume. Where's the upside in his offensive game? Because generally when you look at a prospect and you say, oh, they kind of fit that 3-and-D archetype mold, it's generally because like they don't really have like a bag offensively, or they don't have a lot more than just like, okay, they can spot up, they can shoot. So is he just limited offensively? Like what's there to like about his offensive game?
So the only thing that he's actually put on film that's there to like is that he's a good cutter. He's a great finisher as a play finisher around the basket. His efficiency is elite around those areas, similarly to Amon, like roaming in that back line. And that'll get into how he fits with the Rockets as well. But also he is a willing shooter. Like you said, the volume wasn't incredible, but that's good volume for 19 minutes a game. And he is ready and locked and loaded to shoot at every time he touches the ball, right? But the upside gets into that he's just very young. And it's the way that scouts do when you look at those physicals, when and you have the potential to shoot, you have that athleticism. If we can just add some more skill work to your game, can we develop you as a one-on-one player in the way that Kawhi Leonard was developed? And that's where scouts are really getting at. But actually on film, we can get more into that in the next segment in weaknesses, but there's not much creation in his game right now. He had a little bit more in high school, but that was more about him being bigger, stronger, faster, and more athletic than everybody and kind of imposing his will. But right now, he just doesn't have that element to his game. But one last strength I would like to just point out with him, he has some sneaky good passes throughout the year. Nothing consistent enough and crazy enough, especially with his minutes. But his vision is actually, I think, well on par for a guy of his archetype. It's really good as well.
Okay. All right. Coming up, we are going to get into those weaknesses. What are some of the drawbacks potentially with Carter Bryant as a prospect, as well as his player comps and how he could potentially fit into this Houston Rockets team? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals are here, and every night promises to deliver highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. A game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action actually unfolds? Right now, you can take a look at the odds on favorite to win the NBA Finals. The OKC Thunder, their odds have dropped a little bit. Now they're still the favorites, but only at minus 330. The Pacers creeping up there, plus 265. All those odds and so much more available over at FanDuel.com. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, let's dig into some of these, potential weaknesses here with Carter Bryant. You mentioned a moment ago, you kind of teased it up, right? The lack of creation potentially for him. Now, again, this might not be a thing where, like, if you're drafting a guy and, if he fits into that prototype kind of 3-and-D mold, then you might not need him to ever like have a ton of creation. But the upside with a guy that you're looking at that's this young, you're kind of hoping like, okay, maybe there is something more there, right? More opportunity, different environment, things like that. So what are you seeing from a shot creation standpoint, at least with him so far?
So right now, almost nothing, right? Don't hold me to it, but I seen, and I didn't notice in the film, but I also heard, I think it was on a No Ceilings podcast, that Carter Bryant didn't have not one isolation rep on the year, right? I mean, I need to double check and verify that, but I heard that on the pod I listened to a couple weeks ago, but that was incredible. But when you go through the film, there isn't much creation reps. It's really just catch and shoot opportunities and opportunities off rebounds and putbacks, as well as cutting. And so there's a lot to be desired in that creation aspect. And when you get around scouts, their mind starts to going because he hasn't shown anything in that area, and that's where that upside is coming from. You get those physical tools, you see that silky smooth shooting touch, right, and his ability and his willingness to shoot it, right. And you wonder, hey, if this guy gets his handle together, what can it be on that on the creation side? And that comes up to another weakness that he has. I think his handle is not developed enough just yet, and it's going to take some time. He'll have to slow roll before he comes in and is able to start creating for himself and others. But right now, I think his role is easy to get on the floor as a 3-and-D guy, and if he succeeds at that, he can do the skill work to work himself up to start to explore that type of creation, because he has the size to rise up and shoot on guys, and he has a silky smooth shooting touch, and so that allows those tools combined with that confidence in the shooting, which is probably one of the hardest things. Scouts feel comfortable with developing handles and those types of things. So with his physical tools, that marriage, they hope to bring those weaknesses up and really get him going in the right direction.
Talking about the kind of piggybacking off the creation discussion here, something that did stand out, at least in the little bit that I've watched of him, which I know that I haven't watched as much as you have, but kind of decision making at times, right? There were some moments that showed some flashing, some flashes of passing is what I wanted to say. But he finished the year just 36 assists to 37 turnovers, basically a basically 1-to-1 ratio assist to turnovers. And that's an area where it's like, there were some moments maybe trying to force some passes that weren't there, or trying to force opportunities that weren't exactly the best. And that's an area just kind of shows, can get better over time with decision making, that kind of stuff. But I do think he has the right idea at times. And there are, there's the idea where I think he has the confidence, and there's enough of a glimmer there of kind of a connective tissue piece offensively.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, and there's opportunities where he just prematurely dropped or didn't read the low man and kind of just forced it up. Very young player moments in those. And those are probably some of the moments that kind of held him back with getting playing time. But nonetheless, he still found a way to be very, very effective on the defensive end, and as well as provide an excellent outlet as a stretch shooter. So I think, when we talk about his weaknesses, sample size is always the biggest deterrent for me, because he played a lot of games, but he didn't get a lot of minutes, and we didn't get to see him, in that creation type situations. And then we talk about some of the rushing things and the young player stuff. And so those types of things kind of scare me, because then, am I evaluating the film, or am I letting my imagination go too far? But that's where intel comes in, feeds that gap. You know, what type of worker is this guy off the court? Like, what are the things, what are teams, how is this interviewing going? And I think those things will really carry a team's decision. I've not heard anything negative. I've heard positive things on the podcast, and people who are in the know, who have actual, sources within teams, have all been really shining, glowing remarks. But those types of things it's helped pushing him into the lottery discussion, as well as option for the Rockets.
Speaking of kind of that small sample size theater, I guess, obviously the 37% is encouraging from three, small sample size. How much do we've done the inverse of this, where we've seen like a guy who struggles from three, and then you point to his free throw shooting. You're like, all right, he's a good free throw shooter though. So that should theoretically mean that, like, okay, over time he can build up, the mechanics are good, he'll be okay. Carter Bryant only shot 69% at the free throw line. Nice. But like, how much do you incorporate that into your evaluation of him as a prospect? Just like talking about his jumper. I know you said it was a silky smooth shooting stroke, but like, do you worry at all that maybe that 37% isn't a real 37% because you're looking at the free throws and you're like, all right, he struggled from the line. Is he actually going to be a good outside shooter?
So others have commented on his mechanics not being as smooth, but I thought his mechanics were very smooth. I thought he was very comfortable shooting the ball. And I'm not the type of guy, I've never let free throws really deter me as a three-point shooter. And I think 70% from the line is not a terrible mark for a guy this young. Of course, you would like it to be better, but it's not terrible. It's not an albatross out there. I don't put too much stock in that. I know the numbers often correlate in those directions, but I think these prospects are individual prospects on an individual basis, and things like that I just don't put too much stock in. For me, I look at how comfortable he is taking these shots. Is he afraid? Is he hesitating? Right, and also just his willingness. Right, and so he was a willing shooter, and like you said, do we think this 37% is kind of inflated by the smaller sample size? And I think it's actually depressed a little bit. I think if he'd have got more opportunities, maybe the percentage maybe went down 2 more percent, but he probably would have got up 5 threes a game. You know what I'm saying? And so 36%, 35% on 5 threes a game would have been a gnarly mark. And I enjoyed his mechanics. I actually think while watching the games, I felt that his percentage should have been higher. That's how I felt when I watched the game. Maybe I just caught the game.
Like you felt confident when he was taking.
Yeah, man. Okay. I felt confident about his jump shot. I think he could be a little bit aggressive with it, a little bit too aggressive, and that may have driven his percentage down. He took, sometimes he just wasn't that open, but he was just so ready and locked and loaded to shoot. But I thought he made a lot of those shots as well. So, I mean, to me, I really believe in the jumper. I believe in its mechanics moving forward. It's really, what is that upside going to do? Do I believe in that? I'm not so sure.
He had a couple games, one against Kansas where he went 1 for 6, and then the next one against University of Houston, go Cougs, where he went 2 for 6. So maybe a couple of those games where he just got a little too aggressive with the 3 ball, maybe fallen in love with it a little bit too much. But he also had games where he went, 4 or 5 from 3 against Iowa State. He had there was a 3 for 3 game against Cincinnati. A lot of 2 for 4s. There's a stretch where he shot just lights out against Michigan, TCU, Cincinnati, and then West Virginia, where he goes 3 for 5, 3 for 6, 5 for 5, 3 for 3. So the shooting certainly looks like it's there.
I was like, this dude, he's making a lot of shots.
For what it's worth, talking about the potential like interviews and stuff with these players, Kelly Eco did report that one consistent theme from this year's incoming draft class was the quality of individual team interviews. Meetings with Arizona's Carter Bryant, Duke's Kaman Malawach, and South Carolina's Colin Murray Boyles, all players who could be available at 10, were described as excellent, team sources said. So Rockets have already met with Carter Bryant at the NBA Draft Combine, so that's an encouraging sign there. Certainly a guy that we'd hope they'd be taking a very close look at with that 10th overall pick. Let's go to the defensive side really quick here. Are there any drawbacks to his game defensively that you've seen so far? Anything, gambling or is he just a very safe, solid defensive prospect with still a lot of upside on that end in your eyes?
Well, I think when you're such a talented defender, there are going to be times where you're too aggressive. He's so athletic, there's going to be times where he jump. But all in all, I thought he was pretty solid, and I like the defensive intensity that he plays with, and the way that he can pressure the ball coming up the court, pressure the guy bringing up the ball up the court. So all in all, even if there's some mistakes here and there, there's nothing that worries me moving forward. Those things can be chalked up to young player, right? Young player mistakes, and nothing that I would really worry about. This guy projects to be an elite 3-and-D wing, like an elite defensive wing who can really has the potential to be a defensive stopper with his combination of size, wingspan, and athleticism. And I think that's going to get him drafted.
That's a tantalizing prospect right there. All right, coming up, NBA player comps and potential fit with the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, my favorite time of these draft profile pods. Let's get into the NBA player comps here. Let's start with, so for anybody who's not familiar with how we do this, we do a low-end comp, a mid-tier, middle of the road outcome, and then a high-end comp list. So hit us with the low-end comps first. Who you got?
All right. I always try and get us a couple Rockets in there. So I'll get a Rocket in there. So this is a low end comp. Let's say this guy, he's not shooting it at a consistent elite level, but he still provides energy and some defense. And we're looking at a guy like Daniel House. I think Daniel House is a perfect comp for, a guy.
But a house for the team, though. Let's go. Hey, 40 algorithm, too. God, that's been a minute since I've had to do that. Okay, all right.
But I think it's a really good, it's like it's if he doesn't, really become elite at any of those things, but become pretty good at it and has serviceable size. And so I think Daniel House is a good one. Another one I got a blast for you 2000 babies, man. Michael Petrus.
Petrus.
People know Petrus, man. That was a good player, but a guy who could stretch the floor, who was always ready to shoot and provided quality defense, just prototypical 3-and-D wing that could start for you in a pinch, right? And like one of your main players out can really, start a 20-game stretch and you not drop off in that area like that. That's the type of guy I think he has the potential to be and can shoot it very well. And last on my lower end outcomes, and which is still a very good player, is I think Keldon Johnson. So Keldon Johnson is if the defense really just isn't at the stopper status, and then the shooting is more volatile in that way, but you still have energy and size, I think Keldon Johnson is another very good prospect for him.
Okay, all right, that's a solid kind of floor working with as a prospect. So all right, what do we got for the mid-tier outcomes?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's what it is. Your floors are high when you're a 3-and-D wing.
There you go. Yeah.
With size. So I think median outcomes, one that I really like for him is Toumani Camara.
I love Toumani Camara. He's awesome.
That's what guys, I think, these awesome energy impact defenders that can shoot and just offer so much athleticism and energy on the defensive end. I think Toumani is really where he might fall, some in his career. And also another deep cut, we got a Rocket, Trevor Ariza. I think Trevor Ariza is another guy, 6'8" wing. He started off with a lot of athleticism. It took him a while to really learn how to win, but he had a lot of highlight plays, developed that jump shot over time, and became a very impact player, a very good impact player on championship teams, right? And had a very long and good career. Right.
And there was a stretch, and here's the interesting comp too, right? Is there was a stretch where you thought there might be something more with Trevor Ariza for a little while, and then there really wasn't anything more, and you're like, now let's put him back in the 3-and-D box for a little bit, and then that's where he made his money. So it's like sometimes you think there's a little bit more there. You give a player a chance, maybe they're not really showing what you need to see, so you scale back their usage, you scale back the role back into that area where they're comfortable, and that's where they live. So okay, cool, I like it.
Exactly. And so I think those are two really good median outcomes for him. I think they're safe bets for him to become. He just needs to become elite at defense, right? To meet those outcomes and become average as a shooter, right? And so here we get into, these more concrete all-star upside type of guys for high-end outcome. I think my favorite one for him, high-end outcome. Now, he hasn't shown this amount of passing flash and ball skills, but the physicals, how physical and how impactful he can be, Andre Iguodala. Like, I think that is what guys are hoping and seeing with those type of physical tools, similar size, big guys and big time athletes who could really affect the game. Another guy is OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby, another lockdown defender who's been kind of working on his upside as a creator, didn't really have any, but gradually worked up and got some good upside and really good player. Really good career.
And OG's not a flashy, like OG can create a little bit for himself, but he's not like a flashy creator. He just gets to like a spot on the floor, and then like he's so big and strong and can elevate over the top of guys that it's never going to be on a highlight reel, but like he makes it work. So okay, all right,
exactly, and that's like, so those are one of those like the lower high end outcomes of those two guys. And this is what I think teams are like salivating on. They have these super low floors, and then if everything clicks, you get a Jaylen Brown, right? You know what I mean? That's what your hope is. And Jaylen Brown was a very similar prospect, just a slash. He really didn't even have the shooting chops coming out of Cal. He was more of a slasher type prospect, and really but had all the physicals, had the work ethic, had everything checked out as a worker and as a character guy. And those are the same things they're saying about Carter Bryant. And so that is where guys have, that's where we get into that upside that you can't yet see, right? And so I think Jaylen Brown is like a perfect comp for if he starts to add on to his handle, really becomes an elite shooter and an elite driver, and he has the size and athleticism to complete that. And lastly, I got one last guy for those, is Paul George. Paul George is another guy who started off as a defensive, meister, but the jump shot really came on strong. And so if the jump shot really comes on strong, the work ethic's there, and Paul George kind of slow rolled into his career before he became a superstar, really developed those other aspects of his skills. I think that could be a similar path for Carter Bryant, and I think that's the type of upside guys are envisioning for him.
Yeah, because people forget PG didn't come into the league with that silky handle. Like he worked on that over time, and then got to the point where like he could do like the little back and forth, the hezzies, the crosses, and got to that ISO bag that he had, that we kind of know him for having. When he was at like the peak of his powers with Indiana, and then with obviously OKC, and then the Clippers, and who knows what the hell he's going to look like in a Pacers jersey.
Yeah, similar to Kawhi. Paul George started off as a defensive stopper.
Yeah,
that's how he made his bread and butter. That's how he got on the floor, and then you could just see the budding potential out of him, and they start giving him more. And so I think that's what guys hope could happen with Carter Bryant.
Okay, all right. So imagining let's say Rockets take Carter Bryant 10th overall. One thing I'm curious is, do you think he has enough right now to potentially be a rotation guy if they needed him to be, like, right out the gate?
Well, if they needed him to be, I think he can get on the floor and contribute.
Because my thing is, one interesting outcome here, right, is if the Rockets ultimately make a consolidation trade this offseason. I don't know what kind of a trade that they would make for a star, whatever, that wouldn't probably include the 10th overall pick, but I do think there are avenues potentially where if the Rockets had to use one of Dillon or Jabari or Tari in a trade, Carter Bryant would be a fantastic, potential replacement option for any one of those three guys, as, not just a long-term, like, hey, we're drafting this guy because we think he can be a good player in a couple of years, but maybe a guy that could step in and play like a decent, like 15, 20 minutes a night right out of the gate. So do you think that's a possibility?
I definitely think that's a possibility for him. I mean, he did it for his college team, lower volume, and he was very productive. And with Ime Udoka, defense gets you on the court. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if that guy's bringing it, if he's bringing the intensity on defense, I think he can definitely find his way on the court. And I think he already does a lot of the things that the Rockets like to do, like backdoor cutting, those working that baseline side backdoor with Alperen Sengun. He's going to be able to make all those same finishes that Amon makes in those dunker spots, and he's excellent at finishing it out of those spots. And I'm glad you brought that up. When we talk about it, getting to the fit for the Rockets, it's an insurance fit, right? So, like, I think that's where Carter Bryant really slots in. Another guy, another safe prospect with a low floor that has a high ceiling. And if you start to consolidate to make your team better in other areas, this is another guy you throw in the mix. And now it makes it more palatable if you have to lose a Cam Whitmore or a Tari Eason or Jabari Smith. We want those guys to stay, but if you have to make those tough decisions to make your team better, now you feel more comfortable because you have another guy in those types of modes that can do a lot of the things that you like from the other guys.
Defensively, I know this guy's packing a lot of versatility, right? Would you deploy him if you put yourself in Ime Udoka's shoes? Would he be better served as a on-ball defensive stopper or a weak side like help defender at this right up like beginning stages of his career?
As in the beginning stages, I probably want him flying around as a weak side, just because it's just so tough for rookies to stay disciplined. They're learning the game's so fast for them. It's harder, when you get around those crafty guys like DeMar DeRozan and SGA, the guys you have to be a stopper against are just too good and too crafty and you have to know the tricks of the trade. So I think, but he can still be really effective as a weak side stopper, and of course can play in any switch scheme. But I think eventually in a year or two, I think he could easily, be the guy that you put on a team's best player and really frustrate them. You can tell him to go get a guy and hound him as he brings the ball up the court. I think that's the type of guy he projects to be. But immediately, I would, let Amon handle those duties, or Tari handles those duties, or Dillon Brooks handles those duties.
Okay. And then as far as, especially when you come in and, you're a wing about his size, right? I feel like there's a fine line between bulking up, getting a little bit too big, because you never want a guy to lose the speed that makes them unique or makes them a problem on the perimeter, be it offensively, defensively, whatever. How do you kind of envision him filling out? Is there a sweet spot where you think he is just going to be right in that perfect mix of he's just a solid, he's a solid wing. He can guard down a little bit, up a little bit. How do you envision that kind of playing out?
Well, I think he has already good NBA size. I wouldn't want to put any more than 10 more pounds on him, 10 more pounds of muscle, right? Because you don't want to, because I think he moves his feet well on the perimeter, and you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to bulk him up too much, but you do want to get him strong, right? You want to keep that strong base and let it be just as imposing as it was in the college game, in the NBA game. So he probably is going to have to put him on another 5 to 8 pounds of muscle. So that's where I think it's a good sweet spot for him. I think what he's at 215 right now. So
yeah, 215,
225. I think I wouldn't want him over 225.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Now I haven't, and really quickly before we wrap this one up, just, for his projected range, this is a weird one, because I feel like Carter Bryant, I've seen him it's a wide range. And I don't know if that's going to be the case with a bunch of these guys, because I'm whenever I sit down and we do one of these pods, I check the projected range before we hit record. And so I don't know everybody else off the top of my head, but I feel with Carter Bryant, I've seen a few where he's I think the highest I've seen him mocked is 8, to a couple different mocks, but I've also seen him down in the mid-teens, a lot lower, outside the lottery. Do you think it's a reach if the Rockets take him at 10, or just solid pick at 10? Or do you think there's a world where, Rockets trade back and get some value back and maybe try to scoop him up later?
I don't think it's a reach at all. I think 10 is a good range for him. For me, I think his range is so volatile just due to the lack of minutes and the lack of certainty, and really the way they see upside. It's not really more concrete in the film, but more really due to his tools and fluidity, right? And so those types of things is going to make him eye of the beholder. But with such a low floor, you could very well be getting your 4th or 5th starter, on your team at 10.
Right.
And
high floor.
What I said, low
floor. You're saying low floor. Sorry, you did it once earlier, and I was low floor. I thought we were talking about this guy having a high floor. My bad, high floor. Okay, all right. No, you get just making sure we're on the same page. All right, no, I like him as a high floor prospect. I think that he's going to fit the mold, and he's probably going to have a very long, sturdy, solid NBA career at minimum. And that's kind of, if you can get that, because sometimes the draft is just a crapshoot, right? If you can get that with the 10th overall pick, you can do a lot worse with the 10th overall pick than a potential long-term starting caliber 3-and-D wing. with some versatility and still some offensive upside in his bag. So look, I'm a big Carter Bryant guy. I don't know if he's, I don't know where he's at for me as far as my personal big board. But
I say the only thing though in this particular draft, there's a lot of able-bodied 3-and-D wings in this draft. Like there's a ton of them. So I think that's something that might push him either up or down the board because there's just so many of those guys that have that type of upside. And I think the Rockets, if that's what the Rockets are looking for, they're going to have their pick of the litter because I think they're not going to start coming off the board until 8 or 9.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we want your thoughts on Carter Bryant. How would you feel about him as a prospect for the Houston Rockets with the 10th overall pick in this year's NBA draft? Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
You can find me at Madman Leaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.